Well, welcome and good morning. I want to say I apologize for being open collar. I try to wear a tie every time, but I think either one of two things happens. Either the dry cleaner shrunk all of my shirts at the same time, or my neck got fat over the holidays, because every morning last week or so I'm like trying to do that, so I think I got to accept. I know I'm giving up for Lent. Whatever it is that causes neck fat, I'm gonna give that up. But the other piece is, look, I grew up in the AP, but I love being in the LP. You know, because you got to be AP and LP. We're kind of like brothers, parishes, or cousins, or whatever you want to call it. We have a lot of similarities. So every time I'm here, it just reminds me of like where I grew up. And I think these two parishes have always been kind of on the leading edge in this region of pushing South Louisiana to be the best it can be. And I want to appreciate y'all for just doing that on the forefront. And then the last thing I want to say is, speaking of LP, you know, LABI has always had one thing missing over the years. I can never quite put my finger on it, but now I kind of realize that we brought in one of the LP's finest, Mary Beth Hughes, over there in the back. She is our new press secretary. We cajoled her to come back home from DC. We couldn't be more thrilled with her. And trust me, every single day, when we're talking policy or politics or whatever, make no mistake, the LP has a strong voice in our kitchen cabinet, because Mary Beth brings it every single day. So I want to recognize Mary Beth for being here and appreciate that. Livingston Parish's own. So, hey. So with that, my goal every year when I come here is to kind of leave you thinking, kind of make you think, push you out of your comfort zone a little bit. I hope that you walk away with some of that again this morning. For those that don't know who the heck we are the State Chamber of Commerce for the State Manufacturing Association. What does that mean? That means businesses all around the state, big and small, big company, small company, everywhere in between, they join us and they ask us to do one simple thing: to promote and defend free enterprise, to make Louisiana a better place tomorrow than it is today, to raise a family, to have a business, to grow, to create jobs. That's what we do every day. So sometimes that leads us to the Capitol here in Baton Rouge, sometimes to DC, sometimes in conference rooms, whiteboarding ideas with people like you. So if you want to learn more about us, we'd love to do that. But that's kind of where we are now, because I'm a little OCD and ADD and all the other DDs. I'm going to like walk around a little bit if y'all don't mind. And also I want to be able to see this, because I want to talk a little bit about what's the biggest question facing all of us this year. Now, you're probably jumping to what people always jump to: oh, COVID, inflation, supply chain, whatever Fox News or CNN or whatever you watch is talking about. Those are all important issues. But I would argue that's not really what Louisiana should be focused on. I think you got to take a step back, and I think the biggest question facing us in this moment in time is a little bit bigger of a picture. And it's, do we all, the people in this room, care enough to demand better, support stronger, and strive higher? It's a little bit bigger picture of a question. So what does that mean? Well, it means the same thing it meant after other storms and tragedies. Katrina and Rita back in 2005, the floods here only a handful of years ago. When those tragedies happen in Louisiana, don't we always ask ourselves this question? Do we just want to put things back together the way they once were? Or do we want to rebuild stronger and better than ever? Because when we usually get asked that question, what do Louisianans do? We say yes. We're going to come back bigger, better, stronger. We're going to do it better than ever before. We have to channel that again. It's another time where we have to do that. And why is it? It's not because of a storm in the Gulf or anything like that. It's because right now, all around us, the states we compete with, they're answering this question in a bold way. And I'm going to talk about what other states are doing right now, and that's what we need to be aware of. This is not a tread water moment for us in Louisiana. We are in a big competition, and we better answer the bell. Look, when you look at what's happened over the last couple of years, small businesses have been shut down, manufacturers have had supply chain issues. All of that's had a real big impact in Louisiana. We've got to do it in a bigger and better way to kind of get that done. Because here's why. There's going to be 2 books written of this era down the road. One is the COVID books, and they'll be left and right, pandemic lessons and all that stuff. Those are the books you may or may not read. There's going to be one book that's going to surprise you. There's going to be a book written about this is the era where the South really gained in population, in investment, in businesses. Right now, people are fleeing the East and West Coast. They're fleeing states like Illinois, and they are moving south in a big way. If you look at United Van Lines, the last study this year, if you look at the dark blue states, those are gaining states. You see where they're all leaving. There's only one light blue state in the South. For some reason, when everyone's going to the South, this is a growth era for the South. For some reason, in Louisiana, we're top 10 of people moving out. If you poll the people who are moving out, half of them say they're going for a better job, but half of them are bringing their whole family with them. We are losing people. This is the census numbers. Right now, the legislature, I see Valerie and Buddy are here. Right now, they're in the Capitol right now doing a hell of a job, fighting in the legislature, trying to make sure we have good, strong, conservative, pro-business maps right now. And they're using census numbers to do it. So what's the census telling us? What are the data telling us? Well, there's only 2 states in the South that have lost population over the last couple of years. The other states in the South are purple. They're gaining. People are moving to the South. When you see the dark purples, you know where they're really going. If you project over the next 10 years, what that stat shows you is who are we losing? Well, the red states are the ones who are losing the 25 to 64 population. That's the seed corn of any economy. Those are the people that work, that go and pay the taxes, that start businesses, that create. Those are the people that we're losing and projected to lose more of over the next couple of years. That's the ones we can't lose. We're not losing population because retirees going to Florida. We're losing working age people. The one on the left shows GDP. If you look at kind of coming out of that pandemic, kind of the end of last year is where the whole country started to come out of that pandemic. And so the states that are really winning on economic growth, those are showing you the ones that are coming out quickly and really running. If you look at the South, man, there's growth all over the South. There's one state that's an outlier that was actually losing in that last third quarter in GDP last year, and it was us. In fact, it was second to worst in the country in GDP growth over that era. We're behind New Hampshire. Let's be honest, New Hampshire don't really count as a state. I mean, that's more of like a territory. I mean, that's not a real state. I'm not even sure there is a New Hampshire. Anybody ever been in New Hampshire in here? You been there? It really does exist? It's small, okay, but it exists. Okay, so I take that back. Maybe it is a real state. But anyway, that's the only one that we beat in the last. So we're losing population. We're losing working age population. People are moving out where in other states are gaining. And our economic growth is only beating New Hampshire over the last year. So we got a problem, guys. We got a problem. So what are we selling? I think we got to ask ourselves, okay, so if people aren't buying, what are we selling? Well, this is the word boot we sell. We sell joie de vivre. That's what we sell to the country. Come here because we know how to pass a good time. We laugh, we're joyful, we're great with family. We got a great culture, faith, family. You'll never meet a place with better neighbors. That's what we sell. And that's cool. But the question is it enough? Maybe back in the day it was, but in a competitive environment where people are leaving California and New York and Illinois and they're going to states that have low cost, low tax, low regulation, if that's where they're going, is the word boot enough to get it done? I don't think it does. Let's go a few more numbers. So if you look at in the tail end of last year when the pandemic was coming out, what are the different regions of the country and how they gained? Well, if you look at the South, man, the South killed it coming out of the pandemic. If you look at that red bar, the South really did a good job. But break it down by the states in the South. The long red bar on the other side is us. We were the worst state to recover coming out of the pandemic. If they would take Louisiana out, the South literally would have been like almost back to normal quickly coming out of that. We were the one that's holding down the South. Guys, that should be unacceptable to people in this state. That should be especially unacceptable to people who come from places like the LP and the AP like I did. People that come from the parishes that have always been the ones pushing Louisiana to be bigger and better than we ever have been. The word boot alone ain't gonna cut it in the current era. Those days are gone. So we gotta make a decision. And that decision is we're gonna demand more and do all the other stuff. So what do we have to add to the word boot? We can't ditch the word boot. The word boot's good. But we gotta add more to it. So what is it? What are the other states selling that we're not? You know the greatest hits. These greatest hits have been kicked around the Capitol and DC and Baton Rouge for years. It ain't rocket science. You want to move to a state that's going to have good schools, good roads, low taxes. That's where you want to go. And that's what we got to add to our word boot. Drum roll, please. All right, you got to clean it a couple times. So when you talk about competition with states, everyone says, oh, that's Texas. They're big. That's not fair. Let's talk about little brother for a second. Let's talk about Mississippi, the butt of the jokes. That's Tate Reeves. He's the new governor of Mississippi. He gave his State of the Union speech a couple days ago. This is what he's talking about. He's talking about driving down taxes. He's talking about competing. He's trying to talk for Mississippi. Look at his quote here. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's going after the people leaving California. He's going after the people leaving New York and Illinois. And he's even going after people who dare to try to start a business in Louisiana. And he's saying, come here to Mississippi, because I can give you joie de vivre also. We may call it something different, but I can give you some culture. But I can also give you low taxes, and I can give you a constant march to get to a zero income tax. That's what the states in the South are doing to try to win these jobs. So look, the good news is, I don't be too negative. We start with a glass half full. That culture thing is good. We do it better than anyone else in the country. We're fantastic at it, but we got to fill the cup up. We got to fill it up. We got to stop going to war with a half full cup. So obviously the question is, okay, I got it. What fills the cup up? Well, there's no one answer. Every cup is different. Your cup, my cup, they're all a little bit different. This is my cup right here. If I were in charge of filling the cup up, this is what I'd put in it. I think we can win jobs if on education. Now, it's hard in this parish to talk education for a couple of reasons. One, y'all do a pretty darn good job at it. Two, sometimes you forget there's a whole lot of other parishes that struggle greatly on this. We can't leave those parishes behind. And that's what we got to fix. So education is a big thing for me. I want every parish, not just this one, to have great options for every family. And there's too many parishes that don't, and that drives me crazy. Infrastructure, we've made improvements on this. Last year, the legislature did a really good job of dedicating existing dollars to infrastructure that's going to drive road projects. No new taxes, existing dollars. Over the next couple of years, it's going to be up to almost $500 million a year going into existing roads here using existing dollars. Huge bill on that front. We got to do more on that front. On the economy, if you're out filling the cup up, yes, I want to diversify the economy. Yes, I want to do those things. But I don't want to throw away the existing economy while we do it. If you look at DC, they think it's cool to hate on oil and gas, to hate on American manufacturing, to depend overseas in places like Russia and China for energy and stuff. Well, how well is that working right now? Well, if you go to the gas pump, I don't think it's working too well on that front. And look, if Russia invades Ukraine, that thing's going to go up even more, okay? How cool is it to get all our stuff from China when you're trying to get supply chain issues figured out? It's kind of hard. Anybody drove by a car lot lately? We can make American cars, but if I got to go to China to get the chip, it's kind of difficult, isn't it? So I want a diversified economy, but I don't want to throw away the existing domestic economy at the same time. I want tax reform. Tate Reeves is talking about trying to eliminate the personal income tax. I think that should be our goal. You can't do that overnight, but every way we should chip away at that thing to the best we can. And I think we're starting on that march. Legal system, we've been a broken record on that. I think we have to continuously clamp down on that and make sure that if you're going to start a business here, you don't walk around with a bullseye on your back waiting to get sued and put your dreams into the trash can. And then a constitutional convention. If it were me filling the cup up, I would absolutely put us on a march to a constitutional convention. I think the Constitution we have right now that was originally drafted by Huey and tweaked by Edwin in the 70s needs to be revisited holistically. And I think only a convention to do that. And I think a parish like this would benefit more than anyone on a constitutional convention. Because right now in Louisiana, if you want to get something big done, you got to go on bended knee to the state capitol and ask whoever is the governor at the time, whether it's R or D or whoever it is, it doesn't matter. That process is broken. In the 20s, when they defined that, yeah, we were dirt roads. We were uneducated. We were shoeless in lots of this state, okay? I get it back then. Those days are gone. The states that are winning, like Texas and Florida and Tennessee and North Carolina, they make decisions locally. Their funds are local. They can actually dominate locally. That's what we got to do. I think a convention can get us there. So that fills up my cup. Your cup may look just like mine. Your cup may look different. There may be other stuff that goes in your cup. We all have to take ownership of filling Louisiana's cup, and we all have to do our part to get it done, because the ingredients have to come from you. So how do you do it? How do you fill the cup up? There's a lot of different ways. One, you got to educate your local leaders. You got two good ones right here, but if they don't hear from you, they can't really represent you. It's not rocket science, okay? So you got to tell them what matters to you, what you would like to see for the LP to reach new heights. You got to let them know. Two, you got to back them up when they're brave. What drives me crazy sometimes is we'll have businesses in a private room tell us to go out and see that lion, go fight that one, Wags. You see that building, go scale it. You see that mountain, go climb it. All right, let's do it. Sometimes when you get up there, you look behind and there's not many people with you, okay? You got to support those you ask to be bold. And I don't care if they have an elected pin on their lapel or not. If you don't support them, you can't put them out on a limb and all you're doing is holding a saw. You got to go out on that limb with them. You got to back them up. Because I mean, I'm telling you, in this new term-limited legislature, there is a simmering boldness that is ready to explode. And the only thing holding it back, in my opinion, is they're not 100% sure that people actually want boldness. If you make that clear, it will spread like a wildfire in that building. And that's what term limits has done in that building. And if you don't like the current cast of characters, you run. You run. We started a boot camp a couple of years ago to kind of train business people to run for office. And we brought them all in. We said, look, I don't care if you run for dog catcher or governor or anything in between. Why don't you run? And every business owner I talk to, they're like, oh man, I'm not a lawyer. I can't do that. We don't need more lawyers in government. And I'm a lawyer. I can say that with immunity, okay? So I'm making fun of myself with that statement. We need people who know how to manage a budget, deal with complicated HR issues, understand economies, understand shifting customer demand, know how to deliver a product the customer wants. Isn't that what you want your elected leaders to do? The people that run for office from the business world are some of the most effective people. We just don't have enough business people who want to run for office. So if you're interested in that, this is the time to do it, because we're about to go into a big election cycle. There's opportunities there. So, what are we doing to fill the cup up as an organization? Well, 2 years ago, we tried to make strides on legal reform and COVID-19 response. Mission accomplished. We held off payroll taxes to refill the unemployment trust fund. We were some of the most cutting edge on small business relief packages to go through that point. And yes, we passed big legal reform that's going to make a difference. Now, the Supreme Court has halted jury trials for that last part of the year. That order is now lifted. You're going to start to see jury trials come on. You're going to see that bill and the legal reform really start to take off this year, we hope. Second, tax reform and infrastructure. Last year, big tax reform was passed at the ballot and at the constitutional. It's lowering income tax rates. We got to continuously wind that down. We also made a dent on the franchise tax for small business. It's eliminated now for small business. And it's got a boa constrictor clause on it, which can continually wind it down as our economy grows. If we wake up 3 years from now and that franchise tax is gone, that will be huge. And on infrastructure, I mentioned earlier. This year's kind of the wonky quarter. This year's going to be all about education reform and workforce development. Because when I talk to businesses, that's the big thing that they're drowning in right now. Can they find the workers? Can they find people who don't just know how to apply, but also want to work? Sometimes that's two different things, right? That's what we're trying to fix right now. And it may not be passing a big bill in the Capitol that does it. It might be working with our partners in higher ed and using some of these grants coming down effectively. So that's what we're working on right now to fill the cup up. Talk real quick about education reform, because I want to make sure you understand why it's so important for a statewide business organization to push it rigorously. Look at some of these stats. Under half of K-3 students can read on grade level. Under half. Now, in some parishes, it's way worse than this. So imagine if you're a kindergarten teacher and your student's already behind at that point in time. It's so hard to get that done. The pandemic just exacerbated all this. You send kids home in some of these parishes, they're already struggling to read, they don't have good Wi-Fi, they don't have good laptops, they don't have a mentor that can sit over their shoulder and make sure everything's getting done. Those kids are absolutely falling behind. We cannot let those kids the last couple of years that have fallen in the COVID trap or gap, we can't just let them drift for the rest of their life. There has to be an Apollo mission-like effort to get those kids back up to speed. That's a big deal of what we're trying to do this year. So that's why it's so important. You have to put accountability on schools. Parents need to know what their schools can do. You got to give those schools a mandate to get things done to reference really quickly, and you have to hold them responsible when that doesn't happen. That's the only way we're going to fill this workforce gap, because today's students are tomorrow's workforce. This is some of the things last year we pushed. We put some of those accountability programs on schools. We asked them to ramp up literacy. We have to make sure those things are happening. This year, some more wonky things we're working on. Gig economy. Everyone know what that is? So people have gotten pretty darn used to working at home, flex time, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I don't want to work for you. I'll be a contractor. I'll come in when I want. I'll go there. That's kind of the new economy, right? How do you govern that? How do you regulate that? We're going to work with to make sure pass bills that you don't get over-regulated on that. So if your workforce is going to shift on that, you don't need bureaucratic red tape holding you out of compliance after the fact. So we're going to fix that this year in the session. Credentialing. We've got to do a better job in Louisiana to make sure if you're a kid in high school and you have the ability to do dual enrollment to get some higher ed credits, or you have the ability to get a credential while you're getting a degree, we got to put that on steroids. We got to make schools be more aggressive on that. Because there's so many good jobs ready for kids coming out of high school with a little tweak and a little work. Sometimes you don't need that 4-year degree. We shouldn't apologize for that. We should embrace that in the new economy. That's what we're going to try to do this year. And there's some savings accounts that we want to try to put for those especially in need. If there's a special ed student that's going through the last 2 years, that's trying to learn at home or trying to learn in school with a mask on, and they have communication skills, those special ed students are absolutely far, far behind right now. So we're going to try to push a special education savings account this year to give those families choice, to be able to go somewhere else to find the best solution for their kids. And we will push that very hard. It will be controversial, I'm going to tell you right now. There'll be a lot of people in that capital say, that's not what's best for that kid. What's best for that kid is what we've always done. Just mandate that we always do the same thing to them. Good luck telling those families who've gone through the last 2 years that the same old status quo is the best thing for them. There will be that discussion coming up. That's what we're doing this year to fill the cup. But don't get lost in the weeds, the details. The big takeaway is there will be a book written on this era. The book will say the South in this era was like a vacuum cleaner for jobs and investment and money and families from states like California and New York and Illinois and all that stuff. It's a vacuum cleaner. What is the chapter in Louisiana going to read? Are we going to be part of the vacuum, or are we going to be the exception to the rule? Right now, we're the exception to the rule. Let's not be that chapter in that book. We don't want to be that chapter. So we, as a people, have to do this. You got to demand more from your elected leaders. Going into a terminal election cycle, you have to absolutely be behind them and strive more. That's the only way we can actually rebuild, not to the same level, but join the rest of the states in the South who are rebuilding and going above and beyond. And we've done this before. After Katrina, Rita, after the floods, we did this before. We came back with a bigger, bolder vision. We can do that again. So you got to ask yourselves the question. You can't outsource Louisiana's future to the people elected. It's on you. The question is, are you cool with a half-filled cup? You cool with only going to war with joie de vivre? Or do you want to fill the cup up? And if you do, there's a lot of ways to get that done. Throughout session, as this thing goes, you can sign up for alerts with us. This is the best way to do it. You can text LABI to 66866. That'll put you on our mailing list. Easy ways to click and follow during the session. You'll learn a lot about what's going on there. And you'll learn also how you can kind of make your voice heard. And this is if you're one of those social media people, and you like to read this stuff either at home or traffic lights or wherever the heck you do it, this is where you find us. We put a lot of information out there. But last, I just want to leave with this simple message. This parish is one of the few that has always been one of the ones pushing Louisiana to be a little bolder, a little better. You got to push harder than you ever have before over the last year and a half. Because next fall, as soon as these guys get done with this redistricting session and they redraw the lines, that's going to be like a cattle call, like an alarm bell for everyone to figure out what office they're going to be running for. Because the new lines will be known. You will have your Facebook and your mailboxes and your doors knocked a lot over the next couple of months. When you open that door and they say, I want to represent you in this seat, what do you care about? You better think about how you answer that question. Because if you say, joie de vivre, that's all I'm looking for, give me that and I'm good, that's what you're going to get in government. But if you say, I want bold, 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 where do you stand on bold, bold, bold? You'll be surprised at how many people in that capital are going to say, man, I've been waiting for you to say that. Let's go get it done. That capital's ready to run, guys, but they're not going to do it unless we demand more from them. We urge them to strive higher, and we back them up when they do it. That's what's going on. On the tables, Mary Beth from the LP just did a good job. She said, don't forget, there's paraphernalia there and all kind of good stuff. You can learn about us. You can read to your heart's content. You'll like it there. We have this beautiful building downtown, close to the Capitol. If you're ever in town for the day, like y'all are going today, and you want a place to come stop in, pop in, either for a meeting or for a cup of coffee, or just to kind of visit with other visitors around the state, we'd love to have you on 5th and Main Street. But with that, thank y'all for what you do every day in the economy. Thank y'all for coming today, and y'all have a great time in the Capitol today, and go make your voice heard. Start today with that. Yes, ma'am.
Anybody have questions? Anything y'all want to know? Yes.
Yes, Stephen, with public colleges in Louisiana, how are we comparing with our geographic competitors anyway? Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, the Gulf Coast.
In performance and access.
In our progress, I guess.
So the question is about how our colleges compare with other states. And I would say that Louisiana, we're pretty good on access. We have a lot of schools in pretty much every community around Louisiana. So that is a good thing. There's really no excuse for a lack of access in Louisiana. And I would say in affordability, we're pretty good as well compared to other states. And so we have affordability and access pretty much knocked down. Where I think we have some holes or in a couple spots. First of all, we're heavy on 4-year and light on 2-year in Louisiana. And with the shifting economy, that's not always what's best for some of the kids that we're producing out of high school. And so we need to do a better job of, I think, of articulating, in high schools especially, what some of the options are for kids. Because there are a lot of kids who could easily go into a 2-year program and start articulating that in dual enrollment and have a very low-cost entry into the workforce. We send a lot of those kids sometimes to 4-year schools to hang out in a program that doesn't work for them for a couple of years, and then we convince them to come back as young adults into the 2-year system. I think some of those kids can save some money and some time in the process if we did a better job of selling 2 years in some of these high schools. So that's one piece there. The other piece is dual enrollment. In other states, it's very common for dual enrollment. So what does that mean? How many of you have had kids in high school and their senior year, it's kind of a hangout year, let's be honest, okay? They got some classes, but they also got some gaps. There's no reason we shouldn't be doing what other states do, which are driving dual enrollment courses during that time. To where, because you give a kid who's a senior a taste of a college credit, a taste of a program they can take to a 2-year or 4-year, all of a sudden it's so much easier to get them to go into a post-secondary situation. In Louisiana, there's been too many fights, quite frankly, over who's going to pay for that. So if you're a high school student, who pays for that class? Is it the state funding formula, the K-12, the MFP, or is it the higher ed funding formula? I get it, it's a tough question, but we've been kicking that question around the schoolyard for a decade in Louisiana, and we still don't have a firm answer for it. Now, I do think higher ed's coming to terms with that and working with the superintendents better, but we've got to do a better job of putting kids in dual enrollment courses so that they can have that taste of the post-secondary and go right into it. So we're making progress, but we got to speed it up. Other states are ahead of us on that.
I have a question. I know you guys are looking at the outflow going mainly to Texas and Florida. What, if you had to summarize that in one synopsis, what would you say is the driver of that? What does Louisiana need to do to make that happen here?
Jobs.
So what are they doing to create
Jobs.
those jobs?
So we hit 2 million employed Louisianans as a state about a decade ago. We had 2 million people working in this state. Right now, last time I checked, we're about 1.88. So if you look at the employment numbers, we're not that bad. We're like 4.8 the last time. That's roughly not too bad. But it's that bottom number that's moved on us. We have less people here looking for work, which is why our rate's gone down. So it's kind of a fool's gold number. So that's our biggest problem. We're losing people because they're going for jobs. I mean, that United Van Line survey tells it all to me. Half the people left are going for a job. Now, I think the crunch in the oil and gas industry is a part of it. And so when you see things like the Biden administration shutting down the Gulf, that's a problem. When you see some of the anti-manufacturing approach you're seeing right now, that's a problem. But some of that's starting to click back up. If you talk to the industrial contractors right now in Louisiana, and we have the best industrial contractors in the world, we really do. They're busy again. They are blowing and going. But if you ask them, oh, that's awesome. How many of your projects in Louisiana today as compared to about 10 years ago? They'll tell you it's been an 80-20 flip. 10 years ago, 80% of their business in Louisiana. Remember when Lake Charles was booming and everything was being built and little pockets all over, and in the AP, that was happening as well? That was that 80% a decade ago. Now, they're 80% in Texas for the most part. And so there's jobs happening here. Their license plate says Louisiana. Their freezer's full of Louisiana food, but they're driving that truck to Texas, and they're leaving on Mondays and come back on Fridays. And that's the problem. So, we have to kind of create more bread and butter manufacturing and oil and gas jobs here while we build the new economy on top of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir. Sorry.
So I'm Jeffrey Johnson with Empower 225, and we serve families that are in the same category that you mentioned as far as like educational reform and then needing mentors. So what could we do as a nonprofit to get a seat at the table to help this initiative?
You know, that is one of the most important questions that people don't talk about, to be honest with you. And I'll give you an example. So, in my personal life, I'm on a couple of different local school boards, okay? So in Baton Rouge, I'm on a school called the Emerge School for Autism, where they try to take kids who aren't quite ready for mainstream and get them ready for that. And I'm also on a school board called Cristo Rey. It's in North Baton Rouge, and tries to give kids not just a college prep degree, but also put them on a workforce and internship program so they're ready for college and career when they get out. That's the goal. And when I went into that endeavor, the second one, I thought the biggest challenge was going to be catching kids up for the credentials for college. And that's a challenge. But what blew my doors off was how many of the students we had in that school who've never had a positive male influence in their life. It breaks your heart when you talk to those kids. Like literally right now, it's like bothering me. Because you give them this much attention and guidance, and they fast forward 10 years in one meeting. And it's kind of like shame on us for not doing a better job. So I wish I knew the answer to your question. All I can tell you is I commend you for doing it, and I'd love to kind of visit with you and figure out a way to where we drive mentorship more. Because when people hear mentorship, they probably think, I ain't got time to go sit at the Big Brothers Club for every Wednesday night and play basketball. I don't have the time for that. You don't need to do that. I don't think people in the business community realize the value of a 30-minute conversation with someone who's never been around that type of person. These kids we bring into our office, because we also host students on our internships at our office. And Mary Beth can tell you, the value that those kids get, it's pretty cool. What also drove me crazy is how much value my employees get from it. My employees, when I said we're going to bring in these student workers, I want y'all to mentor them, they're like, okay. But I'm telling you now, they're like, they want to know who the next students are coming in. It's like they want to call dibs on who's going to kind of spend time with them, be in their department. So there's a value to your workplace to bringing students in and showing them what it means to be in a professional environment. And look, just do a little bite size. Don't create some program in an employer that you can't contain. You're busy people. But find an excuse to bring in some students that need some mentorship into your business. Let them ride on your route. Let them ride in your car for a while. Let them come in and volunteer at an event you do, something like this. You will be blown away how they can get a taste of this, and it goes back and it changes their whole approach to academics and what their life goals are. And so, don't have a great answer. I don't think it's some big federal program or state program or blue ribbon committee. We do that a lot in Louisiana. We create something for a press release, not the impact we're trying to drive. But I do think it's just going to take bite-sized ways that businesses can open their doors and kind of show that a little bit. I do think they can
I
go
have some
for it.
input on that.
Yeah, please.
So we've actually, through our leadership program and other things, have had projects come up, and that is one of the things that people want to do is more mentoring. It gets a little sticky when you're talking about adults mentoring high schoolers. How do you do that in a quote-unquote safe environment where there's no accusations of this, that, all those other things, because that stuff does fall into play. So I think it's a really big and important piece. We had one of our foster care programs that was actually doing that, mentoring kids who were in the foster care system and aging out. So we've been engaged in all that stuff, but find a way to put it together and we'll make the matches. That's the big problem, is how do you match them and how do you get them together without liability for people who are involved in it and actually doing it. And who's screening them and all that stuff. So we can't do any of that. We don't have the capabilities, but if your program does, that's a whole different story.
And you know, kids also, in my opinion, you may disagree on this, they find mentors on their phone. And so like, it's not always a 30-minute meeting. You know, if you can find ways to put mentorship guidance, if you will, on social media, on ways that kids will find it. You know, I think we also have to start thinking more creative like that. I think a lot of times when a business thinks of how can I mentor, they envision this complicated program and busing to their office and the things that April's talking about. Those are issues. I think a lot of kids are finding their mentors on the phone, and that's not always the best place to find them because we're not engaging on that space, you know.
And another thing is, we're talking about reactivating a career mentorship program that we had in place, And so we've just been kind of sitting back waiting to see how things played out through whatever, because business people are busy right now. Y'all are all overwhelmed, I can tell. I talk to y'all all the time. I know what's happening. You know, I'm trying for your attention. Everybody's trying for your attention and your time, so that's a big factor. But I do want to ask you, so what happened with sales tax? So it failed at the
Yeah.
ballot, now what?
That was a bummer. So last year we passed a bill in the Capitol that would have centralized sales tax collection. If you're a small business, you know how frustrating it is if you're in multiple parishes. You're subjected to all these different audits, all these different collection systems. It is an outlier. There's only 2 states left doing it. I think it's unconstitutional. It's a train wreck. And we passed a bill to compromise with all the local collectors to get that done. It failed at the ballot. And I think one of the reasons why is everyone's human. When you go to when you go to vote in the booth, you start reading the thing on the wall, and if it's confusing, your guts know. We did a campaign, but we fell on the information gap. And so it's a frustration. I do think it will come back again. We're back in discussions with local collectors, try to find that compromise, but also there's a court case pending. If it doesn't get fixed legislatively, at some point we might just join the court case and say, let's just go fix it that way, which is not what you want to do. But we cannot live in this world. And for folks who don't understand this issue, if you think about how you buy stuff today as compared to online or in person, small businesses have to get outside of Main Street and Parish lines to meet the customer base. They're going online as well. If you're a Louisiana business selling online, selling to multiple parishes, you get caught in an audit trap in Louisiana if you don't have a centralized collector. Other states do. That's what that's trying to fix. So I think the frustrating part is, one, people are distrustful of constitutional amendments. There's been too many, so that was a high burden to do. This is a technical issue, and we're just going to keep whacking at it and come back at it. Clay Scheck-Snyder, who's the speaker and in the district next door, I guess, to this. Is that right, buddy? Next door. He was the lead author on this last year, put like 8 million hours worth of hard work in that. He deserves to be commended for fighting that fight. I think he wants to do something again. He's creating that table again with us and local collectors, trying to find a compromise. I hope we get there. And if we can tweak it and do it differently, we'll do it that way. If not, it's going to end up going to the courts, which is not a good development, but it might be where it has to go.
Well, thanks for the update, and we were very supportive of that.
Yeah,
We
y'all were
had,
great.
like,
I appreciate
on
that.
our end with it, we got as far as it got.
And look, that's the thing. When you push for big reforms, look, you're throwing deep every play. You know, it's hard to complete them all, but you got to keep throwing. You got to
Well,
keep balling in.
I think people look at business and they think that they have, so much money and all these things that they have that they don't take into consideration the struggles of compliance on that end.
And that's a small business issue. I mean, the big guys can hire the CPAs and accountants, and they're fine. I mean, they're fine with that.
Right.
The small guys are the ones that get pinched on that.
So I got one more question.
Yes, sir.
So it's kind of a two-part. So how, you talk about support stronger. First, I think most people in this room do a good job, so proof is required. But, how do citizens support stronger, and how do elected officials encourage citizens to support stronger? Because I think most times it's opposed stronger. You hear it when they're in opposition, but when they support, for me, hey JT, you're doing a good job, this and that, but we'll have 4 people show up to a council meeting, when we're doing something. So as an elected official, what do we need to do a better job to get it out there, to get the citizens to show, hey, we want your support? What can we do, whether that's information, educating on things that's going on, some things we're trying to do, but as a whole, I think elected officials, it's a lack of transparency, accountability. They're at the Capitol, or we're sitting there at the town hall and not really in tune with what our citizens have going on. So what can we do as elected officials to do a better job of that?
It's several things, but you mentioned the Capitol. Let's start with that. If you are supportive of the status quo, if you like the way things have always been, you don't want anything to change, those people show up in droves at the Capitol every time there's a bold measure being considered, in droves. And they're very effective, passionate, sometimes angry, and elected officials feel that. If you're pushing a reform measure, something to actually make us more competitive with Texas and Georgia and other states, and you're trying to lower the income tax, lower the lawsuit climate, lower regulations, that is a change agent type approach. A lot of times the people who love that and push that in rooms like this, they're busy working in their office during the day of that vote. and so they're not there. And so that's one of the reasons why we feel so strongly about being bold and being out there, because we're the voice of you all, and we work great with guys like Buddy and Valerie, and that's good. But at the end of the day, local t-shirts go a whole lot longer than talking heads like us. I mean, I can go to them a handful of times in the Capitol and say, come on, be bold. And I got you, Wags, I got you. But at the end of the day, it's hard to do that 20 times if they're not hearing from local. I mean, that's the truth. And so when you fall in love with the policy you want, you got to go sit with them and say, how can I help you? Is it showing up in committee? Does it help me to testify? Do you want me to go on Facebook and do something? Do you want me to support your campaign? Do you want me to run for a local office and be your voice there? You need to have a dialogue with them on that, is the first thing I would say. The second thing is, next fall, because of term limits, there's a tremendous opportunity from an election perspective to change the way that Capitol works going forward. I think when they're done with redistricting, you're going to have the potential for next year's ballot to put governing supermajorities in that Capitol that are going to be pro-business supermajorities. And it'll be a great opportunity to go in there and pass some really bold legislation on things like tax reform and legal reform and educational reform and all that with that Capitol. So the ballot box is important next year, not just to support these candidates, but some of them are term limits or done else, is finding another replacement candidate where you need it. And so running for office next year is a big way to do it. Pretty much every statewide elected official is going to be open next fall also. Governor's term limited. Anyone who else is elected at the states flirting with running for governor themselves. And so you're going to have a revolving door on there. And so if you get bold candidates in all statewide electeds, and you get governing supermajorities that are basically change agents next year, we have never had that in Louisiana. Never. It's never happened in Louisiana. Texas has been hanging out like that for years. We've never had that. And so to me, next fall's election cycle is critical for, and even if you don't want to run, you don't do anything else, every candidate is going to come to this parish and say, I want your support, what can I do? That's where you got to tell them, there's the three bold things, and if you don't support that, don't talk to me. They will respond to that type of thing. If it shows up in the polling, if it shows up on the door knocks, they will respond to that. But look, you're elected locally, you tell me, what else do you think would help be bold?
Well, I think it falls on the elected officials. So there was a lack of information. It's kind of, we want to sit over here in our office and do our own thing, and we don't want citizens being involved because we can make the decisions. We've come in, hey, no, we don't want to make the decisions. We want to inform you of what's going on, and we do a good job of that in the town of Livingston, just informing people, good or bad. Here's what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, do you like it? Do you not? I think, and a lot of times as an elected official, you get caught up, of doing things. You get caught up in the weeds, and I try not to do that. They're mad because we didn't dig their ditch. I'm like, okay, I had more important things to do. I'll let my DPW guys handle that. But we need to really set that vision and let our people know what we want to do, what we're doing to move forward. So I think just being more informative personally.
It's interesting you mentioned that example because, mentioned the bio, in my previous life I worked in the governor's office. And it is interesting because, in that type of office it's no different than local government or state government. You have to walk and chew gum, right? You have to talk about the bold vision and accomplish all that, but at the end of the day, there's going to be someone who's going to vote as to whether that ditch is empty or full. And you got to be able to do both. You got to have that breadth, because for that person whose ditch is in front of their house, that is the most important issue for them. That is the issue. And so, I think sometimes as a reform-minded elected leader or entity, it's easy to get caught in the clouds and say the only thing that matters is the clouds. No. It's also, you got to do everything in between. And that's the burden of being an elected official who wants to go in and do bold things. The expectation is higher. The scrutiny is more intense. And that should not be a fear. That should be a challenge that is exciting. If you want to go in and be status quo and just babysit the way we've always been, that's an easy process. Just focus on the ditches. Just focus on the ditches. You can probably get 50% plus one by cleaning ditches. But are you going to look yourself in the mirror every night and say, I'm doing this for a reason, or am I doing it just for, a pin on my lapel and a better parking spot somewhere? That's the difference.
I think that's a big deal, and why we have a leadership program, and why a lot of y'all have been through the leadership program is to learn about how that works. And I think the focus on really understanding what your role is extremely important to people. Because if you're talking about a whole bunch of different things, they don't really understand what it is that your actual There's things that only government can do that nobody else can do. That you only have the money for and the authority to make happen, and people don't always understand that end of it. And that's why we try to stay focused on the business end of it, but it does get confusing because we offer a bunch of different programs as well. So I think the clarity on it, I'll tell you where it was ever more clear was after the flood. Is that people really understood what their lane was and what they were in charge of and what they were supposed to be taking care of. And I think that's a big deal, is that people really don't understand.
And that's because in moments, we have shown as a state, or as a region, how we can really gather and put the greater good as our first priority, and everyone buy into it. And everyone do whatever little sacrifice you have to do to put the greater good first. In moments, we've done that very, very effectively over the years, after storms. But it fades at some point. And everyone goes back into their own self-protection, you know, blah, blah. And I mean, it's fine. And back in the day, it kind of worked. In the modern economy, guys, that is a non-option. We have got to develop policies that are aggressively competitive with other states. You can no longer build your economy in Louisiana stealing town to town or parish to parish. Those days did work. It don't work anymore. It does not work anymore. We have to think bolder, and you know, we have to encourage our elected officials to be bold and back them up when they do. You know, if he's going to go beyond digging ditches and do something bold, you can't. When everyone's hammering him on Facebook, you can't stay silent and just put your phone down and go back to binge watching Netflix. You got to say, hey man, no, I disagree. I think he's good. I mean, that stuff matters in the current economy. Anything else? So go change the world, guys. Get it done. Jeez. What are you doing here? Go, go.